I've been really trying.
Yeah. This is that get up on the dance shit, fill up another glass shit. Got me two-stepping and placing gripping on that ass. Hey, I ain't tripping what them haters say. Me and my team super clean, so we do the thing. I'm a product of pop, listening in Biggie flows. Got me lighting up the competition like got the most silly hoe. Tricks are for kids, you ain't playing me. I'm from the biggest little city, ain't no stopping me. My donga, my nigga, we chasing dreams and stacking figures. I'm trying to get us all about the...
What's up, Usos? Welcome to another episode of Faauuga's podcast. I'm your host, Fotuali'i Moliga, and you are now tuned into the number one podcast that helps you pass time by providing you with information provided by esteemed entrepreneurs and small business owners spread around the world. So while you at work, home, or even at the gym, or just driving, if you find value in this content, please hit that subscribe button, like, share, and comment. As I promised my listeners, man, I'm going to do my best to bring the best of the best out here to educate our viewers, you know what I'm saying, to help our youth out there and to expand your horizon when it comes to your career eventually. This man that we're about to talk to right now, man, that I'm so excited to bring you. This man has a lot of achievements, yo. One of his titles, he's a high chief from the village of Faauuga, out there in the American Samoa. If you don't know, now you know. Not only that, also part of the Mason group out there in San Francisco. He's also a principal at a few establishments. Principal also known as business, as I've been educated off air, ladies and gentlemen. He now holds a business which is helps out the youth and family therapy, and then another one called the Pacific 3 Strategies. He's a current elected member of the San Francisco Democrat Party, Emeritus Vice President, San Francisco School Board. He's a former chair Youth and Adolescent Committee Pacific Islander Task Force, and a full-time dedicated husband and father. Ladies and gentlemen, people all around the world, man, please help me welcome my guest host, Fotuali'i Moliga Puletasi.
Happy to be here, bro.
Man, also, it's good to have you on the podcast, bro. I appreciate you taking your time. I know you're a busy man, and I just want to thank you again for, gracing your presence here on the Faauuga's podcast, man. You know what I'm saying? So let's go ahead and get started, man. Why, Oos? Can you share a little bit of your upbringing and for you to come out of Hunters Point and become the man that you are right now?
Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. It means a lot, to have a platform to be able to share. A lot of respect and love. I guess for me, I think the most important thing is to really share about my relationship with God. I think if people really understood who I was, they would know that probably 90% of the decisions I make in life, is pretty much an agreement between me and God. I just kind of been that way my whole entire life. I always felt like since I was a little kid, that somebody was watching over me, from Hunters Point to traveling and moving all around. I think I really got in touch with the spirit when I was in American Samoa, when I lived out there. I used to start going to church, your mom, Auntie Luma, my Uncle Fatu, and his parents, they used to make us go to church every Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, I think it was. And I think that really solidified my relationship with God. And from everywhere else, it has never been anything different other than what is the will of God in my life? And everything that I've done, majority of everything I've done, major decisions, big moves in terms of my life, it really is a reflection of my response to my communication with God and what I feel like God is telling me to do at that current time. So I feel folks could probably see it and be like, oh, that's very different. Some of the things that come to mind and things that I pray and things that God put in my heart, and the one thing that I've always to listen to what God was telling me to do, because there's that scripture in the Bible that says where there was this story in the Bible where it was saying that one of the folks back in the days, the reason why they were jealous and angry at their brother was because they missed their calling from God, that they didn't listen to their calling from God, and therefore for the rest of their lives all they kept doing was trying to seek revenge. I think it was David or something, right? Trying to kill David and all this stuff, but God always had his blessing on David. I think it was maybe Solomon or something like that, right? I'm not a pastor. I'm not theologist. That's not me, right? I'm more of a, if I hear something that resonates, and I'm gonna take it with me. But that to me has always been kind of my thing. Like I've never wanted to go through life knowing that, I could become envious, jealous, or hateful upon another person and put harm into their life because I refuse to listen to the calling that God put into my life. So that kind of like motivates me to like do things that, folks could be like, wow, what's going on? Like why is he doing this? Or how did he do that? Everything that's happened from birth till now, none of it was planned. I ain't planned none of this. I never was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this. I just like, you know, took whatever was in front of me, whatever, I got through prayers and just went into that direction.
Oh, what? This is just a personal question because I'm curious because I know and I was excited that you were going to be our future lawyer, our attorney, the man of the law. But then all of a sudden, a year or 2 years later, while you're in the University of San Jose, you change your career. What happened?
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to like my previous response. I pretty much like make decisions based off of like, what God is telling me at that current moment. And a couple things was going on. I was in school, it was my senior year. There was a genocide happening in Africa, in Darfur. That was the first time I actually learned what genocide was. And it just really like shook me to my core. When I actually got to law school, I focused on like humanitarian law because I couldn't believe that like tragedy happening across the globe where mass amounts of people were getting killed by the hundreds of thousands. Right? Like that didn't sit well with me at all. Right. So it was at that point, I just had like this calling inside of me, to really like for the people, like the heart of the people,
Hmm.
like getting killed. Right. So, for me, like when I get those call-ins, like sometimes it's not really clear what it is that God wants me to do, but I just kind of hold on to it. And so fast forward, I'm in law school. Now I'm living back in San Francisco, in the projects, we're in the projects. And I'm going to this little small law school down in San Francisco, which was cool, right? And mind you, law school was probably one of the best education experience I ever had. When I got to law school, I was like, oh, this is cool, man. I like this. This is fun. I was in my groove. I was doing my thing. But then my siblings were going to school at the same time, right? They were at Burton High School. And I remember going over there and they were doing horrible, right? Like they were doing horrible. But not only were they doing horrible, they were all doing horrible, like all the Samoan kids, right? Pretty much it was
Mm.
Samoan kids. They were all doing horrible, right? Like they said only like five had a 2.0. And like out of the five, that's all they had was a 2.0. We're not talking about 3.0s, 4.0s, right? We're talking about only five out of like 50 plus kids had like a 2.0, you know?
Wow.
And part of the kids that didn't have it was, my younger siblings. And so at that time, going to church, listening to the word, and I'll never forget this. I was at church one day and Pastor Alex, I was going to sold out with Pastor Alex Toyina, and he preached this word. And I went to go talk to him afterwards. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He said, wherever your heart is, that's where your treasure is. Right. He's like, you never forget. He said, wherever your heart is, that's where your treasure is. So that's what he preached that day. And he told me, he said, listen, man, I'll never forget this. It was me, him, his wife. We sat down and he said, you can go to law school for the next 3 years, come out, and become a lawyer. And all these youth, kids, families within the next 3 years are going to probably be on the streets, on drugs, or in jail or prostitution. Never forget that. That's what he said. And then he was like, or you could just start serving community today and helping them out. That was Sunday. Monday, I turned in my resignation to the law school. I hit the streets and I never turned back, you know. And so I've been in the community ever since doing work, started up a nonprofit, to help out, young women, young Samoan women. Really because like people ask me why. I was like, well, most of the women that were in my life were the reasons why I got to where I'm at today. They supported
Hmm.
me, my mother, my grandmother, my aunties, my girl cousins, so I felt like it was important for me to really pay homage to like, women, because, of my trajectory, So went in, started doing that work, and that led from one thing to another. And I was on the school board. I got elected as a my first. So all that to say, right? So then, like, I'm still doing this community work, and now I'm in grad school, right? And I get invited to be a part of the Pacific Island Task Force. It's like, hey, we need your help. Come out here and help us. Um, Good peoples, right? A lot of goodwill folks out here in the Bay Area doing good work. And I ended up getting appointed to chair the Child, Youth, and Adolescence Committee, right? And so my responsibility was to come up with recommendations for, the public health system in Alameda County, San Mateo, and San Francisco to service, our Pacific Islander youth, right? Remember going back, this has kind of like been like my thing. And this now we're talking about like 11 years down the line, right? From that initial conversation I had with Pastor Alex at the church. Now we're talking 11 years later, we're still on the ground, right? And so we get in there, and one of the things they noticed was that we didn't have enough people to do the work, right? And plus, we didn't have enough people in office, right? We didn't have anyone in office actually at that point, right? And if you know the name of the game, you can't really move the needle or get any resources if you don't have people in office, right? And so Uncle Lolo, Uncle Lolo Fotuali'i Moliga, he was running for governor around the same time. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, shoot. Maybe we got a little bit of politics in us, right? That kind of like sparked my interest. It's like, maybe we got a little bit of politics in us. And I was going to grad school at the same time. So I got really interested in the topic, right? All for the sake of helping out other people. I got really interested in it. I was really, I got invested in our policy class. My policy class was my favorite class. There's a whole nother story behind that. A long story short, I remember they were like, our Pacific Islander Task Force group, part of the subcommittee. Now I'm working with some other folks, John Nauer and those guys, all good peoples, right? And, John asked me, he's like, dude, I need you to start going to these school board meetings and going up there and talking and telling them that we need A, B, and C, right? I was like, all right. So that was my job, right? So my job was to go, to the school board meetings, to go and talk and like advocate and, let these people know what we need. So I get there and one of my boys, we actually got him on the school board, my brother, Stevan Cook. And he's sitting over there and I get there, mind you, I'm the only Pacific Islander in the room, right? And you look around, crickets, nobody, right? So I'm like, all right, at least I got my dude up there, right? And so they're talking about their data, boom, boom, boom. I text him, I'm like, bro, y'all not talking about my kids, Pacific Islander kids. He's like, well, come up here and say something. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, I was like, well, bro, you up there, why don't you say something? Like, why would you say something? Mind you, there's no Pacific Islanders on the board, no in the room, no staff, no zero. By that time, ain't no Pacific Islander ever won an election. They know Pacific Islander ever run for school board in the history of San Francisco. And I think there was only one dude who tried to run for DCCC back in the days, but by that time, there was no one else who was running for office in the city, other than my brother, Neil Bell, who ran school board with me during that same time. But kind of going back, I'm sitting there, I'm like, dude, how I help you get on the school board? And you're not even going to like advocate for Pacific Islander kids, on top of the stage, right? It's my dude. So I was like thinking to myself, and at that point, I, I'm not showing up to these board meetings for like no job, right? Ain't nobody paying me, right? I'm showing up because like we got work to do. So I'm like emotional. I'm like, dude, really? I think I ended up tearing up in that thing because I was like, damn. So that means I gotta show up to this damn meeting by myself. I gotta take my ass up to this podium. I gotta go up there and hoop and holler for these people to maybe even consider helping my people out. Plus, I got my dude on the board, and he's like, you got to come up. At that point, bro, I must have just turned it over to God, and God was like, bro, it's time for you to run. Because in my head, I was telling myself, I was like, if I'm about to come to these meetings, and it's just about to be me up in here, I'm not sitting on this side. I'd rather just be sitting on the other side where the school board members are, right? Because if it's going to be one voice, I want my voice to count on the other side. Did everything I told you that I used to do, count my blessings, pray to the Lord. And it was cool because at that point, what I do is I pray. And I go around and I just check in with my mentors, right? Just to make sure like I'm on point, right? And all the stars kind of like all the mentors were like, "Yeah, bro, it's time to go." Boom, 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 boom. Literally, we damn near ran the strongest campaign that election cycle, right? Ran the strongest campaign that election cycle. We got we ran such a strong campaign, bro. We got appointed to, and I say we because it's not just me. Like people like look at it and it's like not like, and this is a thing. Like it's never been like a me thing. It's always been like this is a this is a purpose thing. And so I say we is like we as in like the whole team, the whole movement. Like we ended up getting appointed by the mayor. Like literally, like I think a couple of weeks or maybe like I forget. Like I think it was a couple of weeks or maybe a month before the election cycle happened. Right. Boom, we flying all over the place. We getting endorsed by everybody. Right. Now we in office. Right. Fast forward later, we get in there. We're doing all the good work. Right. Boom, boom. We could talk about that. And then I go through this recall, and I'm like, and it's so funny because like as I'm going through this recall, I'm like, man, it's so interesting because like I got into this work to help out the people because the education system for my siblings and my side of my own folks was horrible, right? And now I'm going through this recall, and now it's getting ready to end. And to me, it was like a beautiful moment of like God telling me it's over. You can now rest, right? By then, bro, it had been like 15 years of like dedication in the community, right? And God was literally telling me, like, yeah, after this, you can rest, right? So during that last campaign cycle, during that recall, we was all out. That's all we knew how to do. We just said, psh, put our head down, and it just kept going. But I would say for me, once that ended, that was the ending of like my contribution to community work here in San Francisco. Right, I felt like I've done everything I needed to do. I was at peace with God. I was like, okay, God, now I know why you called me during that time when Pastor Alex and I had that conversation. Because even during that time, the call in my head was education, right? Now I know. And it was funny because when I got on, I was like, damn. So 11 years later, this is what you were talking about, God, the Board of Education. I did not see that coming, right? So when it ended, I was at peace and I just let it rest, And so here I am now, So I went out. I was able to pursue like one of my other dreams of, people don't really know, like I'm actually a therapist. I'm not a politician, you know. I'm a therapist. I was a politician because of the call, the will of God and His call to go and do it. Right. I had no plans on never. I'm just like okay. Um, so when that ended, I was able to go back then, and that's when I started up Fotuali'i Moliga Puletasi Youth and Family Therapy, and I also created P3 Strategies, the consulting company, and that's what I'm doing today. You know, so all that to say, that's kind of like been the trajectory of how I've gotten here.
So much lessons in what you were saying. One of those things that I do want to cover is you're transitioning from now that you got a job. Before you became one of the chairmen in the Board of Education in the city of San Francisco, what was one of the programs that you were involved in that you see was implemented? Because like you said, there was no Polynesian representative. And now that you were able to get in, what were some of the things that you see the impact that that you were able to help the community of San Francisco?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the biggest one was when I got on the school board. It was funny because I got on there. I'll never forget this. One of my buddies, he was a principal at George Washington Carver during the time. He's like, man, you probably just say anything and they'll start helping because at that point there was nothing, right? Like absolutely nothing. When we're talking about school district, right, there was zero, right? Now, what people have to understand is when you're talking about systems operate based off of policies, right? Policies give systems direction. And if you don't have no policies in place that direct staff members to say, hey, we want you to support someone's students, then it's not going to be done, right? It's just not going to be done. It's not going to be done systematically where it's like formalized, right? Formalized, right? People doing like one-off things, fine, right? But if you want something to be formalized, right, that's why people are always passing laws, right? You want to be able to put a policy in place to give direction. So we got busy, and that's exactly what I did. Right, we wrote and passed the first um, Faauuga, actually. I actually called it the Faauuga uh, resolution. It's the Faauuga Pacific Islander resolution. And people always say, like, well, why'd you go with the Faauuga? In San Francisco. Well, in San Francisco, what you're dealing with Samoans. You're just gonna have to call it what it is, right?
Mhm.
So for me, it was really important to really instill, because the other piece that I didn't mention earlier was it was my relationship with God and also my relationship with our culture, being Samoan. Those are
Mhm.
kind of the things that kept me on my feet, you know. And so, as we kind of like, moved into the programming, into like the work, for me, it was very important for like our students and like our families to really get back to that own if I saw more. And
Mhm.
so we just boom. If you look at if you read through the resolution, it's a very comprehensive resolution, and I mean, we have professionals, Samoan professionals. We have some allies who really dug into it to really create a framework, that addressed everything from mental health, special education, college career, and it was a pipeline, right? So we call it the pre-K to college pipeline, right? But rooted in the Samoan culture, right? And so still till this day, it is still in place, right? So once you pass it, it is still in place. So now that I'm not on the school board, fine, okay. But the policy is still in place. And I'll give you an example too, right? We take it back to the hometown. So Tumanua is no longer in place, right? But the
Correct.
policy that he helped create it, which they call the DETA sessions, which is also a policy, it's a legislative policy, is still in place and it's helping our people out today, right? Same as like what we did at the San Francisco School District. So that was the first resolution ever historically passed in this country, you know, to specifically say support Pacific Islander kids with a really intensive lens around Samoan students, right? And so from that, we ended up building the first the first dual language immersion Samoan school, preschool here in the city, and it's the first of its kind. It's first of its kind, probably like in the country for sure. They might have like similar programs in like New Zealand, and places like that, but in this country, in the 50 states, first of its kind, right? So now you have a school, a preschool here in San Francisco that are actually teaching young generations how to speak Samoan, the culture and the language, right? And they're just building that program so it goes from pre-K to K to first grade, second grade, right? They're building the pipeline to go all the way up. And so when I left, we were able to like hire the staff to be able to like staff it, right? They have more work to do, but there's now staff in there who literally works in the superintendent office, which you will not find anywhere else in the country, right? There's a Samoan staff that works in superintendent office under the Faauuga initiative. It's called the Faauuga initiative, right? So that's like, to me, when we talk about this work for our people, Pacific Islanders and Samoans, the number one goal when I was on that school board was if whatever happened, and plus I felt like, I was like, man, I can't believe I'm on this school board anyway. So while I'm on the school board, we're going to make sure that, by the time we're done, that the work for our people is complete, and that has been done. And when I left, I think we put about a good $1.5 million into that program. The program is supposed to be 2.5, so the district is going to work towards, fulfilling that whole promise. But yeah, man, a lot of great success. They are now teaming up with the colleges. They're partnering with the VASA program with Dr. Polita. Those guys are doing good work over at City College and over at San Francisco State with Dr. Pony and those guys, and so it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing. The culture right now is very, very strong here in the Bay Area.
You're board in education, man. I appreciate the answer. That's well informative. We have kids that are about to graduate from high school. What academics do they need to go to or take, to get into some in your area? Do you have any advice that you want to give our youth members, directions, stuff that like the top things that you wish you would have known where you now, to get you faster to where you're at right now? or was and as far as being a school board member in the city?
If you're interested in this area, I think it's
Hmm.
important to like get involved, go find like a mentor, go join your, if you're part of a Democratic Party or Republican Party or whatever party you're part of, right? There's a bunch of affiliations in your local town, say go familiarize yourself with the process, right? And then just to sit and learn and like listen and um, you'll pick up on like how the system works. I think that would probably be the first thing, because again, like when I did it, it was like, hey, we need you to go, and I was like, all right, and like we just jumped straight in there. So we was like building a plane and flying it at the same time. But if you could reverse it and go back, part of it is to get in there, get involved, learn about like some of the committees in your government system and wherever you live in your cities, see if they got committees that you're interested in, go learn about those committees, go show up to like board meetings, if you have a voice, you want to voice your opinion, go to board meetings, there's always a time for the public to voice their opinions, you know, but really, it has to be like something you're interested in. I do
Hmm.
think everyone needs to be voting. Whether if it's as minimal as like voting, I think everyone needs to vote. Everyone needs to go get registered to vote. Everyone needs to do their homework when it comes to voting. Make sure you're like reading those books. They hand out those voter guides. Read the voter guides. Sit down, make your own personal decision on who you want to elect or who you want to vote for. And then go and try to stay as current as you can on events. There's the news, and then there's also like independent news, which I think is good. But you have to do your own due diligence of figuring out like what is the truth. Right? Part of the part of this whole thing is like what is the truth, and politics is not for just everybody. It's not. It looks fun, like people see it, like oh, they're all this. Trust me, all that shiny whatever that really isn't about the work. The work is really done on the ground and stuff. And the other thing people need to understand is you don't get paid being a politician, right? There's no money in politics, right? I was getting paid $500 a month, working 20, 30 hours a week,
Hmm.
plus a full-time job, right? So it's not like, you have to be prepared for that and you have to understand what it's going to be demanding of you, you know. Um, But if it's something that you enjoy, when you go if you're in school, I would say get involved with your student government. See if there's a youth and government program. See if there's a speech and debate. See if there's anything that involves the uh, the democratic process. Uh, I would get curious about those areas. Right, talk to your history teacher. Right, your history teachers to know stuff like that. But it's always good to get involved with your local politics in a way that makes sense for you, right? Because if we don't, then the system is always going to be tilted in a direction of people who are actually taking advantage of the political system. Because it's very important, very important. And Samoans, Pacific Islanders, we have to get involved. In Samoa, it's very political. People are very involved, right? I'm surprised people are not that as involved here in the 50 states, But back home, if you go, it's very, very it's very strong actually, which is a beautiful thing to see.
You were getting voted out, and I believe it wasn't just you because it was on the article. I forgot what year that was. There was a few of you guys that was getting voted off the seat. Do you mind, sharing with us, the listeners, like, because it is a political move. Like, not only that you have a seat, but then all of a sudden now it's been taken away from you and stuff like that. Can you educate us? Like, what exactly does that mean when you're getting a vote to get voted off the seat?
Yeah, so recall is when there's enough there's enough petitions to be able to start um, getting someone off, recalling somebody from their elected seat, right? That's kind of like one of the only ways outside of a general election that you can remove somebody from their seat, right? And so you've seen it like tons of times. It's always there's so many recalls happening in California. I think Governor Davis, was recalled, and when he got recalled, then you saw Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger get I think he was appointed or elected afterwards, right? So recalls is like it's a strategy, right? And if used well, you can use it to your advantage to be able to like try to push your agenda. And that's exactly what happened here in San Francisco. You know, there was a mixture of like disgruntled like family members because of like the pandemic, right? And then there was also like, your opportunists who are continuously like in this game of politics trying to like, figure out angles on how to push their agenda, right? So unfortunately, it just so happened the stars aligned for them, to where they were able to take advantage of, I would say they took advantage of like, the angst and the fears and just kind of like, um, the vulnerability of families at times, during coming out of the pandemic as well, Um, but yeah, so myself and like two other board members were recalled during that election, and it's a thing. It's a thing that happens. It's and the other part about it is it's not like it's illegal, you know. It's something that you could actually do. The only difference I think here in San Francisco, which makes it a little bit more difficult, um, which is if I think if this was actually in place, I probably would still be on the school board. Is in San Francisco, you don't have to like put up like different opponents of who this person is going to be replaced by. So like when Governor Newsom, because Governor Newsom was going through a recall during the same time, there was also a list of other people you could vote for, right? It's like, all
Mm-hmm.
right. And if you look at the list of people that you can vote for, people are like, well, I'm not voting for any of these people. So we rather just stay with this guy, Governor Newsom, right? Same as like for so when we got recalled, actually not the same. It was very different. So it just had three people up there, didn't have anyone else. Like, okay, these are going to be your replacements, right? And so finally, when we got recalled and they actually, selected the three that were going to replace us, one of the people actually didn't even win her following election because she was making racist comments, right, on the school board. So she didn't even last more than a couple months. And the other two, that well, they're still on there, but people would, if you were to like put it up and like compare it, who would I rather pick, either these three or these other three? I think overwhelmingly the city would have went with myself, and I'm not sure how they would have voted for the other two. I would still be on the school board, right? But because you don't have that in place in San Francisco, it's easier to like, really pin people against just themselves, which I think makes it a little difficult. So there's some changes to the system, which I think needs to happen. But that's pretty much, what recalls are. I mean, and again, for me, it's like no harm, no harm, no harm done. Like it is what it is. Um, it's not illegal. It's something that people could do, and people took advantage of it, and that's what happened. You know.
Man, that's crazy. Sounds like to me that that's. I know you mentioned earlier before the importance of voting. That has a lot to do with also us, our community, getting involved into the voting. That probably would have had an impact. So you think that would have had an impact to help out, to keep you on the chair? I mean, on the seat, on the table.
Oh, definitely. The difficult thing about Pacific Islanders is when you talk about voting blocks, right? You
Yeah.
talk about voting blocks. In order for you to actually like move a vote, right? You have to have a couple things, right? One, you have to have a large voting block if you can. Sometimes they call it your base, right? And when it comes to Pacific Islanders, especially in San Francisco, you don't really have that, right? Because your your back is against the wall because your deficit is there's not many of you in the city, you know, compared to like say your other constituents like your Asian community, your Black community, your white community, your Latin community, whatever, right?
Hmm.
So elections is really about a numbers game, you know, but you know if you have a strong community like a Pacific Islander community, right, and they are able to lobby, they're able to advocate, they're able to like project their voices in other ways that could move the vote, right? That could be helpful too. And I think, at this point, communities are starting to rebuild. I think we had a stronger voice back in the days, I think there was a stronger presence, and I think we're now starting to regain that momentum, today, but it still needs a whole lot of work, still needs a whole lot of work. But we're getting there.
How do you think social media? You think social media with the whole, because it wasn't that long ago that mainstream media, which is like Fox, CBS News, were like the anchor for information. And now, as you know, social media has been this new rise of like I want to say outlaw that's coming in and really turn voters' attention to whatever they want to, they believe in. Somebody like a Joe Rogan, his word can move needles when it comes to voting, depending because of the massive followers that he has. Saying, so my point is, you think social media too will help, in this case, in the future, in the city of San Francisco, when you're talking about Polynesians, yes, we don't have the numbers, but let's just say you have a Polynesian that has the numbers or a followers like a Joe Rogan or Taylor Swift, quote unquote. You think something like that would help? Just shining the light on what really is going on with the political move, in San Francisco. You think that would have helped out, or still would have made it not?
Yeah, I think I think social media is important, and I think it has like its place, but I still do think that it is limited. I think
Mm-hmm.
it can move a message, right? Um, but does it turn out voters in the way that you need it for Pacific Islanders? I
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen the data on that. Um, but there's a lot of examples how like, um, movements can be, successful through social media, but really the work that I feel like will move the needle is on the ground, right? Like really just like on the ground, building community, getting together with people, talking to folks, right? Like the social media to me is not going to win elections solely, right? What's going to win elections is, people actually interacting with constituents because not everybody's on social media, right?
Correct.
Social
Mm-hmm.
media is a very isolated world, right? And not everybody's on social media, right? So, um, I think people need to just get back to the basics. I appreciate my time back home in Mo'ua because it really just reminded me, or really just instilled into me, reminded, I guess, injected, um, this sentiment of like, we are all like in community, like, like we just, well, I'm talking about Malua, not Kukuila, I'm talking about Malua, like literally you just walking next door, talking to people, building, like when we were in the islands, I was telling people, it's like, really for me, when you're in Samoa, it's not about like the sightseeing and everything. That's cool, right? You could do that all in like 1, 2 days. It really is about sitting down and just interacting with people, right? And just listening to people, hearing the stories, building community that way. I feel like, that is probably the best way, to get like things rolling, and to rebuilding trust and to rebuilding, confidence and like our ability to work as a unit, But social media does definitely it has its place, but it's definitely not going to win elections. It can move a message, but also like there's so many like manipulations that happen in social media that it's really hard to like figure out like what is accurate and what is like inaccurate, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be very biased, right? It's not like 100% of truth. So brothers like Joe Rogan, right, and like yourself, right, who are doing podcasts, right, like social media is like snippets of things, right?
Yep.
Like, but if people do their due diligence and actually listen to the whole podcast, listen to what Joe Rogan and like people like yourselves are saying, then I think that's a completely different story, Then you could fundamentally probably get moved that way, right? But what's dangerous about social media these days is folks are going off of sound bites, right? Which doesn't really have like a lot of teeth to it, right? And so to me, just morally, I just think like, that's not right. Some people might disagree, but it just feels like that's not really what the people need. But again, politics, it's a very tough field because really sometimes it comes down to like it's like a game. People are just trying to win, like trying to win, trying to get into seats, right? And there's a no holds bar, and people are just out there going to do whatever they need to do to win the game. And so if there's no rules and regulations in place if people are operating in the confines of those rules and regulations, then you could technically say it's a fair game, you know. But yeah, so to answer your question, I think it does, but to an extent, yeah. Do I think it's going to move the needle? Maybe, maybe not. Do I think it's going to get out voters? It hasn't really shown that it's going to, for Pacific Islanders, that it's going to turn out voters, you know. I think turning out voters for our folks, it really is going to be about building human interaction, you know, in person.
Nice. That answers that. And then, to close out the questions of education and politics, the last one is you mentioned, folks, get involved, go into these Democratic or political parties, join in the city. Where do you find those kind of people? Because I'm just thinking out loud as a coconut head. I'm like,
Yeah, I would, depending on where you're at, you know, and I'm talking about the 50 states, right? The 50 states.
yeah,
In the 50 states, I think, you know, the first thing that comes to my mind is everybody could just Google your Democratic Party or your Republican Party or whatever
hmm
party it is. You can just Google it. Like if you're in San Francisco, you can Google San Francisco Democratic Party, right? And it'll bring you up their website. Once you get into their website, you know, they'll have like things in there like, you know, events, you know, they'll have past meeting recordings where you can like follow meetings and pay attention, right? They'll have information on how to get involved, right? That's the easiest place to like start, right? And so Kentucky, so there's your so for us, there's the San Francisco Democratic Party, and then there's also your state party, right? So there's city and then there's state, right? You could also type in your state party, Kentucky Democratic State Party, right? And see what pops up from there. And then once you get into those forums or those platforms, then you could just play around, you know, and figure out like, you know, if they have any like events that you would like to join and get curious about. The other thing is like when election season comes around, right? Everyone's going to be getting mail. You're going to be seeing people on the corners, you know, probably like campaigning and stuff, you know, and people are also going to be recruiting. You know, you can go onto their websites, you can Google their websites, see who they are, see if you like the platform, and you can send an email because they'll all be recruiting volunteers and say, hey, can I just volunteer for your campaign? And then, you know, they'll invite you, you'll go and do some volunteering for them, and then you'll also be able to learn about, the process. In San Francisco, there's also clubs, you know, Democratic clubs, all different type of clubs. We also established the first Pacific Islander Democratic Club here in San Francisco. So now there's a Pacific Island Democratic Club, you know, that's headed up by my good friend Gainer Siataga, you know, and so there's also like the Filipino Democratic Club. There's also like, you know, the LGBT Democratic clubs, right? There's all different type of Democratic clubs. Or, you know, again, I say Democratic because I'm a Democrat, right? But there's various political affiliations who might be paying attention or tuning into this, right?
hmm
You can just Google, very easy Google, right? Or, you know, when the election season comes around and, you know, you read the pamphlets and stuff like that, you could just easily do your research.
And appreciate that. Very informative when it came to political movements or just understanding a little bit about it. My next question,